Greetings, everybody. My apologies for the delay there. It kept streaming to a test stream that I had set up because I reformatted my computer. Alright, so first thing I want to say while I'm on the stream here is if I'm coughing, I'm sorry. I've had bronchitis for 6 weeks. So, bear with me. I'll try and mute my mic if I get into a coughing fit. And so if I go silent for a little bit, that's why. But otherwise, we should be good here. This is our first ever live training. And essentially, what I want to do is I want to make it so that after you watch this stream, you should be able to make fire and explosions in EmberGen with no problem. I'm not going to cover every single way that you can make an explosion or that you can make fire. I'm just going to cover my general workflow and kind of how I do things. This is going to be kind of off the cuff, that kind of thing. So bear with me, but this should be really good, should be really informative. And yeah, so here's what we're going to be covering. What are the key components you need to have EmberGen simulate? So how does a simulation work in EmberGen? What do the nodes mean? That kind of thing. Basic quality of life shortcuts. You know, I see videos of people manually clicking the reset button. You can press R to reset your simulation. Spacebar to play and pause, that kind of thing. How do emitters work? What does it mean when you're emitting fuel? What does it mean to emit smoke? What does it mean to emit temperature? That kind of stuff, we're going to go over that. Understanding how forces work. Did you know that emitters are actually a mask for a force and that it's not global? If you plug it into the sim node, then it's global. So we're going to go over that kind of stuff. Understanding combustion in EmberGen. So how do I make things burst into flames? How do I make things explode? That kind of thing. We're also going to go over pyro shader and smoke shading for our new renderer. We're going to go over, of course, how to create explosions, how to create fire. And we're going to do some advanced stuff and over kind of like the final parts of the tutorial, going over using volume modulation to add details to your explosions and that kind of thing. So, other than that, let's go ahead to the next slide here. Here's some things that are probably going to change this tutorial in the future. We're going to have sparse simulations. So right now we're kind of limited to our bounds inside the simulation. Your smoke and all that stuff can hit the bounds, and well, that's kind of bad. So we're going to fix that with sparse simulations. It's also going to improve performance, allow you to do much larger simulations, that kind of thing. If you don't know what a sparse simulation is, it just means there are no bounds, essentially. Retiming for simulations is going to change a lot. Right this second. Let's see. If anybody else hears an echo, let me know. But yeah. Okay. Anyway, so what we have, where we're at retiming for simulations. So we're going to have retiming for simulations. So if you want to make the first 15 frames compressed to 2 frames or something like that. Okay, I sound like a droid. All right, let me check my settings here real quick. All right. Sorry. I tested the stream beforehand and it sounded fine, so let me see. We're getting there. We're solving problems. Let me disable some stuff here. Okay. Can you guys see? Okay. I reduced the audio input capture, so okay. Alright, cool. Yeah, so I reduced some stuff, so hopefully this sounds better. And if you can't hear me, let me know. Okay. Alright, cool. And sorry for room noise. I don't know. I spent the whole morning trying to set this up. Okay, so anyway, so retiming for simulations. We're going to have that. Essentially, What that is if you want to compress 15 frames into 2 frames, or you want to expand 20 frames of simulation to 200, you will be able to do that in the future. That will drastically change how you make explosions and fire. So what we're going over here is really just the basics, and then as EmberGen becomes more featured, we'll revisit this. Okay, cool. Glad to hear that I sound good. All right, so adjustable voxel size, more detail. So right now, people complain, I can't get detail without modulation, or without this, or without that, or higher vorticity. We know. We're going to fix it with adjustable voxel sizes in the future so that you can have the same size bounds but have more detail. So that's one thing that's going to change things. Also, better rendering will probably make some things in this tutorial obsolete. And then the last thing is we are going to change combustion for the better. We want to make it so that if you fill a bowl or something up with fuel, and then you ignite one side of it, it will explosively ignite the rest of it, and things like that. We want that to be tunable. So those are some future things that are going to kind of change what you're going to learn in this tutorial, but no worries, we'll have more tutorials in the future to cover that. All right, 075, what's the holdup? So the reason why we haven't released 075 publicly, even though we said we were going to release in January, now it's September if you didn't know. This year's flying by. So animated meshes still need auto scaling. GPU particles have issues with the rendering. Exporting has a lot of bugs still. And then we have some missing UI fixes. But if you are following along this tutorial and you have a license, if you're in our Discord server, you can get 0.7.5 as a pre-release for testing and feedback. So that's why we're doing a live stream on 0.7.5 and not a previous version. So if you have a license, you can get it. Unfortunately, if you're an OTOY user, you will only be able to get 0.7.5 when it's out publicly and officially released. And the reason for that is the OTOY build is a completely separate thing, and we have enough problems just trying to manage our own standalone. So that's that. The last thing is just kind of an update on our company, where we're at. I want a statistic that I want to share with you because I am hella surprised, and I want to thank all of you. So JFX update, we have 15 people working at JFX full-time now. That is crazy. Just a year ago, it was only like 5 of us, and we just hired 4 new people last month. We've spent over $1 million on the development of 0.7.5. If that's not proof that we want to make this work instead of me just cashing out and going to go buy a Ferrari or some shit, I don't know what is. I am doing everything that I can to make sure that EmberGen is the best visual effects tool you have ever used in your entire life. So that is my goal. So yeah. All right. So there we go. Over $1 million. That's crazy. Oh, all right. But that also means that we've had good sales, right? So thank you all for your support. Really, really appreciate it. Then we're doing everything we can to improve the tools and becoming an industry standard. So that's everything. We are doing everything that we can to get this out. We're doing everything that we can to make real-time tools the standard. And we really just want to make it so that you guys can do really good work. So that's that. That is the end of my little slideshow. This stream will be recorded, so if you have to pop out or whatever, you can come back in and watch this. Okay, so now, where were we? All right, so this is kind of some stuff that we're going to go over. This right here is a little simulation that's been running in the background. All right, so where are we going to start? And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my little slideshow thing over to my other screen so that I can read it and go through the tutorial properly. All right, so first off, what are some of the key components that you need to simulate things? All right, so if you want to simulate in EmberGen, there are a few nodes that you need that are automatically populated whenever you start a new project. This is our default scene. It does not look very real or anything like that. It's just default parameters. That's kind of like a medium for everything, and we think it's a decent starting point for starting like a new simulation or whatever. So that's kind of what the point of the default project is. You might say, well, why do you have a default project? Well, we have one because you can't just make parameters not do anything. Like, it has to do something, and this is the something that we chose. So the pieces of a simulation that you need to know. Every simulation needs to have a shape that it's emitting from. A shape can be a torus, it can be a sphere, it can be a box, whatever. It can be an animated mesh if you want to bring that in. It can be whatever you want. It can be noise, anything. All right. So, is anybody else having blurred issues? Because I have it set at like maximum stream quality. It should be streaming at 1080p. Hopefully. All right. So anyway, but other than that, so we have shape primitives, and you can use particles and other things, that kind of thing. So then we have the emitter. The emitter is probably the most important part for how your simulation is going to look, besides the actual simulation. Or besides the actual simulation node. So the emitter is going to tell you, am I emitting? What is my transform in space? How much fuel am I adding to the simulation? How much smoke am I going to have? One quick note is that the more smoke you have, the more the oxygen will be suffocated essentially in the sim, and so you can put your fire out by having more smoke. So that's one key thing to note. If you're like, hey, I have fuel, but my explosion isn't igniting, well, you're probably suffocating it through smoke. Another thing is pressure, right? How much pressure do we have? Do I want to suck things in? Do I want to expand things? That kind of thing. Then we have forces, which is like velocity transfer. So that's if you're moving your emitter, is it going to transfer some of that velocity to your simulation? Then you have visuals. Do you want to see your emitter? Particles. I'm not going to get into that. Okay. Then you have your simulation node, which the key point here is this is what is controlling your bounds, right? So you have your bounds, so you can say, hey, maybe I want it taller, so you can change the voxel count in Z, click apply resolution, and boom, now you have a taller box. And we can reset that and go ahead and apply new resolution, whatever, get back to it. So there we go, right? Then you also have your simulation. So we have two different modes. We have combustion and colored smoke. Within the combustion mode, it just means I have the opportunity to have fuel. You don't need to have fuel. If you want, say, to do just smoke, what you can do is you can turn fuel emission off, and now you can have just smoke. You can have all the smoke you want. And also, one of the things is that your temperature will affect how fast your smoke or fuel or whatever rises, and you do need temperature to ignite your fuel. The hotter your temperature is, the brighter the fire is going to burn. That kind of thing. Hopefully that's kind of self-explanatory. Then we also have time control, which deals with looping. I'm not going to get into that right now because it doesn't really work just yet. Then we have combustion. So right this second, let's see. Let's go to add fuel again, and we're going to lower our stuff just a little bit to kind of get some more fire or whatever. And by the way, I know my rendering here isn't like super pretty. We're just going over the basics here. So basically, we have a new thing where we call it just like simplified parameters, right? So you don't need to dive into what we would call, I guess, the black box of the combustion. If you want to, you can by exposing advanced parameters, and then you have all kinds of stuff. But for now, if you want, say, more smoke, so basically, for every unit of fuel that I burn, I want to emit some amount of smoke, right? And so you can, increase that. And so as your fuel burns, it's going to make more smoke. Then you have smoke dissipation, which is how fast is my smoke going to disappear, right? If you have it 0, then it's not going to disappear hardly at all. And one thing I will mention is that the default preset has a slicing mask in the volume node. And so that kind of like makes it more alpha or whatever. So I'm going to turn that off for this demonstration. Then we also have the flame intensity, which basically says, how much fuel am I consuming? So the less your flame intensity is, the more fuel it's consuming, as far as I know, during the combustion process. And if you have it as a super high flame intensity, it's typically not consuming as much fuel and it's burning at a much higher temperature. So this is kind of a weighted parameter that controls a bunch of different things. And then finally, we have expansion, which basically says as my fuel is consumed and as we produce more temperature, as we produce flames and smoke, how much am I going to expand from pressure and that kind of thing. Then we have Vorticity, which basically says how soft or smooth is my simulation going to be, right? So we have some really smooth smoke here with no vorticity. And as we crank up the vorticity, that's whenever we start seeing, details in the smoke, details in the fire, that kind of thing. Then we also have large vorticity, which is going to say how many big, larger vortices do I want? How do I want, to create eddies and that kind of thing in my simulation? So that's kind of what that goes over. And then the last thing I'll go over here, I'm not going to go over any of the other parameters right this second. We'll get into that in the future, is your force. And the most important one is buoyancy. So if you want your fire or smoke to be zero gravity, just make sure that you zero out all of these parameters and you will have zero gravity stuff. I have people ask me that all the time. Hey, how do I simulate something in zero gravity? Well, turn your buoyancy off. But otherwise, if you increase your buoyancy, it makes things more violent, that kind of thing. So that's self-explanatory. All right, so the next node is shading. I'm not going to get too much into this because we're going to do it later. But basically, shading controls how your essentially how your simulation is looking, right? One thing to note is that if you export a VDB, your VDB is not going to inherit any of these shading settings. What we're trying to get people to do is import like a backplate and a camera and then render inside of EmberGen and then composite it into their rendered scene. That is the goal of what the preferred workflow we want people to do, because VDBs aren't going to have as much shading power as EmberGen does, or rather other renderers aren't going to have as much shading power as EmberGen does, because our renderer is tuned specifically for EmberGen and our data types and other renderers are not. So we would hope that you would export image sequences. If you're in games, you export flipbooks, and then you're definitely using our renderer. Another important key is lighting. So, how do I want my, smoke to be lit? So we can turn off any node, by the way, that has one of these little power icons. So we have ambient lighting, we have directional lighting. So it's semi-physically based. You can add more lights like a point light. So we could turn this off, and now we have just a point light. We can see our shadows, all that stuff. And we also have a cool, neat little gizmo now that kind of shows like our bulb size. So we're really trying to make the workflow easy inside of EmberGen with gizmos and transforms and all that stuff. So that's really cool as well. Anyway, got sidetracked. So that's kind of how our shading node works. Like I said, I'm going to get into this, a lot more. You can really start to get some really good shading really fast just by turning on a couple of parameters. And so we'll go through all of that in the future. The volume node basically says, what kind of things do I want to do to the volume? And anything that you do in the volume node is actually going to export as a VDB. So if you, add sharpening or whatever for extra detail and that kind of thing, that kind of stuff is going to export in a VDB file. And of course, it's also going to be in your renders and all that stuff. And then also you have like the ability to render like your GPU particles, that kind of thing in the volume node. And so the idea here, so far, where we've gotten, is the shape tells the emitter where you want to emit from. You can have multiple shapes, by the way. You don't need to have just one. You can have multiple emitters. You don't need to have just one. Then you plug in the emitters into the simulation node. The simulation node says, great, now I have the data that I need. for fuel and smoke and temperature. And now I'm going to take that and I'm going to do my simulation stuff with it. So I'm going to decide, how quickly you're going to burn, what rate you're going to rise at, whether or not temperature is going to be grouped together if you're using like shredding, that kind of stuff. So we're going to do the actual simulation. Then the next step is, okay, well, now we need to pass on that information to the volume. So we need to essentially voxelize everything and get the renderer ready. And so we pass that over to the volume node. And then we have the scene node, which is the node I haven't talked about yet. The scene node controls everything that you see in the viewport. So, if you want, specific HDR tone mapping or whatever it happens to be, you can choose that here. You can, make, more contrast or not, gamma, exposure, color vibrance, which I use the color vibrance thing quite a bit sometimes. Then you also have colors, so you can like swizzle your things. So it literally changes everything in the scene. You also can do, cool things like, vignette, and like you can do, chromatic aberration or, Kuwahara stylized stuff or whatever you want in the scene node. It is a scene-wide, like total, like it changes everything in the scene. So that's why it's called the scene node. But also, everything that's in the scene node is going to be in the scene. So if you want lights and stuff in there or whatever it happens to be, it's all going to pass through the scene node in the end. So, skyboxes, your ground, anything is eventually ending up in the scene node, and that passes on to your viewport. So we'll go back to realistic and change our colors back to RGB. Okay, so with that, I think that kind of covers the scene node. Then the final thing, which that's all you need for your simulation really. Actually, you do need the render node as well. And then the render node just says, hey, I'm here and I'm going to do some kind of output. By the way, if you do want to export a VDB, you pull directly off the simulation node and you can export that. Okay, so that's kind of like the basic requirements for a simulation, right? That's kind of what you need. You need a shape, you need an emitter, you need a sim node, you need a volume node, shading node, and a scene node, and then you can choose whether or not you want lights, that kind of thing, and that's the basics. Okay, so, all right, I'm trying to go fast here because we've got a lot to cover. All right, so basic quality of life shortcuts, just real quick. If you press R on your keyboard, that is going to restart your simulation. If you press spacebar, that is going to pause your simulation. If you're paused and you press Z, that is going to step through your simulation. And you can step one frame at a time to find the perfect frame if that's what you're looking for. So those are my keys that I'd like to tell you. We also have another key, which is G, which resets your camera. Right this second, it doesn't work, but I'm pretty sure that G is going to be the binding that we're going to use, 4075, and so that will reset your camera whenever it's ready. And also, one quick thing is like if you select a bunch of nodes and you press C, that creates a comment around it if you want to comment something, and comments also act as groups. And then the last thing is if you are trying to do like a image export or something like that, and say you went through the node graph here and you did like export image, and so instead of it auto linking like it just did, say you do like emissive, you can do this and press Control L, and so Control L will auto link nodes, and it works for stuff like this too. So say all this stuff is unlinked or whatever, you can just go over here, Control L, it's going to auto link those nodes for you. So that is a really good shortcut. One more tip I will give you is if you're following along in the tutorial, you're like, man, like I don't know where he said vorticity was, you can just type vorticity in this search box and you can find it. And so that goes for any node. You can say, hey, I want fire color or something like that, or I want translucency. You can find that kind of stuff by searching stuff in the search bar. And if you don't know where your node is, say gradient, you can search for nodes as well in the right-click menu. So right-click allows you to bring up the little node thing. And then if you want to say, well, hey, like what forces can actually connect to my simulation node? Great. You can drag off of any pin that you want, and it will tell you what nodes can connect to that, and it will automatically connect them. So that's another great thing about EmberGen. Just a quick thing. And then the last thing I'll say, I'm not going to get into like what the camera controls are. It tells you like down at the bottom whenever you do that. So like left click is camera rotate. Control left click allows you to zoom in, that kind of thing. But if you go to settings and you go to preferences and then you go to camera, we have default, which is basically Unreal Engine 4, Unreal Engine 5 camera controls. We have Blender, and then we have industry compatible, which is Maya. So we have these different options. So if you use different keys and you're like, I wish that I had the camera system of Blender, great, go change it in your preferences, right? I don't like that control setup, but you might, so go change it. So there's that. All right, so now the next thing, understanding how emitters work. All right, so kind of a little deep dive into this. All right, so emitter activity is something that you can animate. And so by the way, if you want to animate anything, you can single left click it, and then we see that it pops up on the timeline. Then we can hold shift and click, and we'll add a key, and then we can say maybe we want to turn it off. So we'll just click the key, uncheck enabled, or we'll double click the key, uncheck enabled. There we go. And so now the emitter turns off, right? So you can animate anything that you want. And that's kind of what the activity stuff does. And of course we have your transform. So there are two different types of transforms with your nodes, all right, or with your shapes. So you have a shape transform, right? So say if we offset this over here, and then we have our emitter transform. So then if we rotate this, it is going to be relative to the emitter's pivot. And we also, I think we have a, we don't have it in this particular build, but we have a new node called transform that is kind of going to act like the transform here so that you can do some complicated things. So yeah, so let me go ahead and just like reset this stuff. Okay. So we have that. All right, so that's kind of what your transform does. It's just your position and your rotation. Then we have emission, and the emission is the most important part. And I'm going to, it's going to say, hey, if you turn this off, it's going to delete your keys. Yes, I want to continue. And so what we have is, so now with our emission, there are a couple of different emission modes, and they're quite important to know the difference. All right, so no emission means that we are not going to emit anything at all, obviously. Add says I am adding to the voxels around me a certain fuel rate. And you'll notice that you need a very low fuel rate, like 30%, to get something that's viable to use. And if you start going way higher, which I don't know why this parameter goes this high, it really shouldn't. It's just not really usable. So you're really going to play in like the 25 to 65% range, something like that. Maybe more, maybe less. And that's kind of what adding does. But replace says no matter what the value of the voxels are, I'm not going to just add to it. I am going to completely delete what the previous value was and replace it with my new value. So that's what replace is. Add is a bit more dynamic because it just kind of dynamically adds and then the fuel burns away. But replace is going to be a guaranteed source of fuel, if that makes sense. And the same thing happens with temperature. With temperature, we typically want to replace it, but if you add it, you can get some maybe some more dynamic results. Maybe you like the way that it looks, that kind of thing. So that's what replace does. And then we have our pressure. You need to be careful with pressure, especially whenever you have smaller bounds and that kind of thing. But it basically just says how much outward force am I generating from this emitter. So that's that. And then we have forces. I went over that. That's your velocity transfer. Visuals, do you want to see the emitter or not? Typically, I prefer not to see the emitter, which is my personal preference. And then, like I said, we're not going to go into particles. And actually, these two tabs are going to get yoinked out of the emitter node, and they're going to be their own GPU particle emitter node in the future, is the plan. So from there, now we have our simulation node. And so part of the let's see, was I going to go to the deep dive of this? No, I'm not, because we're kind of going to cover this whenever we get to the explosions. All right, so and sorry if I'm cramming like too much into this tutorial. The idea is to make it so that this is like our very first thing, so that beginners like can understand, and even if you're on the advanced level, like you understand what our thought process is of why we're doing certain things. So the next thing that's really important is forces. All right, so if I delete this force node and I go to our vorticity and I just turn this off. So this right here is just a base simulation. And typically in other tools, whenever you start, this is probably something similar to what you're going to see. I'm going to make this a sphere. And so this is kind of what we have. And I'm going to go to my emission, just make sure that I'm emitting like the standard stuff. And I'm going to make some smoke. So this is what we have. And actually what we can do is we can go to our simulation size and just apply a new resolution so we can kind of see what this does. So this is like the standard that you get in other tools. And this is kind of what happens to your smoke as it rises without any vorticity and that kind of thing. So what do forces do, and you know, where are we going with that? So basically, if you plug in a force to the emitter node, the emission shape, so the primitive that you have, is going to be a mask for that force. So here's an example. We have a line force, right? I'm going to stop the push strength, and I'm going to make it a twist strength. So now we can see our little twist indicator. And so now you can see the smoke is twisting down here at the bottom, but it is not twisting really at the top, right? That is because the shape here is a mask. And so as an example, if I bring in another emitter and I say no emission on everything, so this is doing nothing. It's not emitting anything at all. I'm literally just going to use this as a custom force node, essentially. So let's say we bring in like a torus or something, and then I go to visuals. I want to see my shape. And so we're going to go up here and we're going to double click to delete the line. And then we're going to plug this force in up here. Now you can see that the twist is only in the within the torus itself. And so if I make the torus bigger, and then I lower the major radius here, and then maybe I hide my emitter now, you can see that there is a twist force happening right here, exactly where the torus is. So what happens if I plug it into the simulation node though? If I plug it into the simulation node, it is going to affect the entire simulation, right? And so because the simulation is global, there is no mask. However, with things like line forces, you can have a fall off. So now you can see like a cylinder where the fall off is. You can do like an inverse fall off so that it's really strong in the center, and then it dampens out, you know, as it gets out and that kind of thing. And so, you know, we have the ability to do that. You can also change like the fall off distance, you know, make it bigger, make it wider, whatever. Actually, sorry, inverse fall off is where the center is like lower velocity, and then the outside is higher velocity. The opposite is true. So there we go. So that's how the forces work essentially. And so if you wanted to say add more detail, just for instance to your simulation, one good way to do it is to add a force noise node to the simulation. So this is a good little tip. And we can just bring this amplitude down to like 0.2 or something like that. But then what we'll do is we'll lower the scale, and then we'll go to our simulation and we're going to just change the vorticity just a little bit. And you're going to see that this is already adding quite a bit of extra detail to the simulation. If we turn the node off, this is what the simulation looks like. So it does have some detail, but whenever we turn on the force node, it adds in quite a bit of extra details. And if you want to kind of amplify those, you can just increase your amplitude maybe increase your scale, that kind of thing, and you're going to get more details. And then you can see a preview of your noise down here in the node. So there's that. All right, so the next thing was understanding combustion in EmberGen. I kind of already went over that, and we're going to go over that whenever we're doing our explosion. And it looks like the next stuff is actually just stuff I'm going to cover in the explosion. So let's get into it. This is why we're here. Creating an explosion. So actually, the first thing, I think I'll probably do fire because it's simpler. So if we wanted to create some good flames, so first off, let's just see some examples of some decent flames. So here's probably something that we're going to try and create. We've got some neat little flames. Then we also have another one that I have, let's see, I call this one Great Fire, and this one uses some pretty advanced modulation stuff. So I'll show both of these methods for how to get these different styles of flames. I personally think this looks really good. And so hopefully, let me just take a look. Yeah, okay, I know what I did. All right, so what we're going to do, so if we want to create this, we're going to go to a new project. All right, so bam, here we go. We have our fire. The first thing that I like to do is try and make the shading look pretty good. So we're going to go to the shading node. We're going to go to flames. If you want to not render flames, you can uncheck the box. If you don't want to see scattering, you can uncheck that box too. All right, but anyway, so we have our render flames, and shaping by flames is pretty important. Basically what it does is I would consider it the brightness. So how bright is my fire going to burn within the renderer? How am I going to amplify or multiply that temperature? Then we have shaping by density, which says if I have smoke and that kind of thing, I also want to set that on fire as well, right? And you might say, well, why is that useful? So I'll open up a quick project since we don't have anything going on quite yet. So in this case, I have some extra stuff going on in the density, and it leaves behind this neat little magical vorticity type trail and that kind of thing. And by the way, we added the ability to have collisions on particles, and we're also going to have it so that you can spawn like events and make explosions and shit at the end of these particles and whatnot. So that's a whole nother thing, which actually I can't hide it. Hang on, let me see. Here we go. So like here's like an example of a flamethrower that's like colliding with the ground and stuff like that from particles. So by the end of this tutorial, you should be able to like make some stuff like this. All right, so let's get into it. All right, here we go. So going to our flame shading. So what we have is we have the shaping by flames, we have the shaping by density. In the vast majority of cases, you're not going to use shaping by density, in my opinion. Flames coloring. This is going to decide what channel or what method you're going to use to shade your flames. In this case, we have a color ramp, which you can see this ramp preview. And so we can change like the red ramp, you know, and basically this is just saying at what rate are my colors changing. And so you have like your base fire color. So like, let's say that we choose like a deeper red or something like that. And then we want to say, you know, say maybe 1, maybe 3, maybe 6 or something like that. And then we can just kind of like tweak this and change it. This might not be the most intuitive method for you. So, you know, results may vary with this particular method. And then also you can see that like my stuff is pretty bright. So you might say, okay, well, like my colors are all right, but we also have like a color remap. So you can remap your ramp. So maybe you say, hey, you know, maybe I want to get more in this little range down here instead of the super bright colors. So you can remap that range if you want to. Then you also can remap things based on your temperature. And so I'm going to just kind of change those a little bit. Another thing that you can do is you can select this down and we can say Blackbody. So Blackbody Radiation basically determines, you know, which I don't know the science behind it, so actually I'm not even going to try and explain it. You can look on Wikipedia if you want to find out what Blackbody Radiation is. But essentially, it just says, based on the laws of nature, how do I want to color my fire, right? And we try to do our best that we can to model Blackbody Radiation. And you can kind of see that as we increase our ramp scale, it's going to get bright. And actually, like if you have a welding arc and that kind of thing, like in real life, it's like super, super blue because the temperatures are ridiculously hot. Don't quote me on that. I think that's how it works in real life. And also there's like electrical shit going on too. But regardless, the brighter things are in real life, the bluer things kind of get. And on the lower end of the spectrum, things are more orange. So we have the ability to kind of tweak and change that. And so still this fire is not like looking like really good. And so one of the key things that you can do is you can check this box called Flames Transparency. And what this does is if we go around to say about 4100 or something, we are going to start to get transparency within our flames. And so one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my emitter and I'm going to emit some extra fuel here, because I think we need some more fuel so that we can kind of get a decent looking fire. And so then back into my shading node, I'm going to kind of just tweak this. And so one of the things is, guys, is like there's no like, I guess like special magic way to get good looking flames just yet. You kind of have to tweak things. So if we say, hey, you know, my flames are a little bit bright, maybe we want to tweak the flame shaping. Then we have our translucency level. We can kind of change that. And then we want to maybe change our color remapping. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to expose a custom gradient, because that is a really good way to control what you're going to do. So we can right click this to do a pin override, or you can left click twice or whatever. And so now you're going to see that, so we expose the fire color gradient, right? And then it says connect the fire color pin to a gradient node. So we need to expose the fire color. And now we can drag off. And also, we have Midi imports now, guys, for all you musicians and live MoGraph people and that kind of thing out there. So now what we have is we have a custom gradient that we can edit. Instead of having to use parameters or trying to deal with Blackbody or whatever, we can have our own gradient. When 075 is officially out, you will be able to save your own gradients and that kind of thing. And then one thing is we can kind of bring off this black color, and that will help us get some cool variations. So one thing you can do is you can flip the gradient so that the inside is dark and the edges are bright. So we can go over here to our shading, increase our shaping by flames, and in this case we might want to turn off flames translucency. And so what we'll do is we'll kind of, let's see here. I'm actually not going to flip this though. Sorry. All right, so what we'll do is we'll do this. We will turn our flames translucency back on. Sorry that I'm fumbling here. that's kind of the result of a live tutorial. So we have this, and maybe we want it to be more orange. So as this goes up, we can kind of make it more orange, that kind of thing. And then another thing that is also affecting our stuff is the scattering. So one thing that we have is which we don't have it set up in our simple parameters yet, but we need to do advanced parameters and go to our scattering. And I'm going to change our flames contribution. So now that we can really start to see our flames here, because the problem is it just kind of like washes out our flames. So I need to lower this a little bit. And so then also what we can do is we can turn off our ground and our sky. And then I'm also going to turn off our smoke emission. I'm going to go to combustion, and I'm going to lower the smoke dissipation, but I'm also going to kind of like raise our flames intensity, and then I'm going to lower our generated smoke. So you can see we're actually starting to get some pretty good fire here. And so if we go back into our shading node, the big key now is going to be tuning our color remap, now that we have our color gradient that we like. And of course you can kind of fiddle around and play with the gradient. You can add as many colors as you want. Maybe you want it to get darker in the center, that kind of thing, depending on what you're going for. And so then we can go and we can kind of like tune this translucency level, make it a little bit higher. We also have translucency width, which is going to say, do I want just literally the edges to be bright and then the rest to be like a thin film? So you can kind of change that. We can also change like our flames density, min or max. We can change the density scale if we want them to be a little bit more dense. We also have flames opacity. I don't really recommend playing with the flames opacity too much unless you are dealing with emissive masking and like large explosions, which we'll go to in the future. So this right here is a pretty decent way to get some good fire, like I said. And that's kind of the gist of fire. And so let's open up that project where we have some good fire. And so let's see, great fire. So how do we actually get this? All right. So the good news is if I forget, I can just open a preset. So we have a really low remapping range and whatnot, and we also have shaping by flames up a lot. So the big key to this, though, is that we have modulation. And so what we're doing is we're taking the vorticity of the simulation, and so we can see here we're tweaking the curve of the vorticity. And so basically what it's doing is it's saying, I want to control the temperature based on my vorticity. And so one good thing that we can do to kind of show off an extra thing is I'm going to go to my modulations. I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to say vorticity again. I'm going to go to smoke. And so now we're just replacing the smoke. And you can see that it's adding the vorticity of the simulation to the actual fire, just like it's adding it to the smoke. So that's kind of how that works. All right, so let's see. We go back into our shading. And so these are the kind of the parameters that make it happen. And so our shaping by flames is really bright because the way that the vorticity is working, I guess that it's lowering the temperature beyond a certain range. And we can also remap our temperature. But what happens is as we increase the remap range, we are essentially cutting out pieces of the flames in the center where it's hotter where it's not as hot. And so that's how we get some of these cool little shapes. But let me go back to a new project. And so we're gonna kind of restart the fire thing again. Sorry, I'm sweating here. All right, so going back into the flames, another way that I would start this is I would get the emission right first. So I say, okay, I want to get some pretty decent flames here, and then also I want to make my temperature add, and then I want to set my primitive to a sphere. And so now that's a little bit too much flames. So we have that. Then we go to the simulation. We go to combustion. Maybe we want to generate a little bit more smoke. Maybe we want to lower our smoke dissipation. Maybe we'll probably increase our flames intensity. We're also going to increase our expansion to get a little bit crazier flames. Then we're going to go to our noise that's automatically plugged into our emission, and we're going to increase that. And so now we have a pretty good setup here for some really tall flames. Another thing I'm going to do is in shredding, I'm going to increase my shredding intensity. And you can see what it does is it basically groups up high clusters of temperature, and we're going to get some really violent flames here. So if you have something that is just like a raging inferno, you probably want to add some shredding to it. I'm not going to touch turbulence or anything like that, but I am going to increase my vorticity just a little bit. And one thing that doesn't hurt as well is flames can tend to be pretty soft, so you may want to decrease your vorticity. But in this case, I'm going to make it more of like a inferno type thing. Then I'm going to turn on my emissive masking, and we can change like our density reference here. And so something like this. And what this is going to do is it's going to mask the flames by the density of the smoke. And then we're going to go to the flames over here, and we're going to kind of increase our colors. And then I'm going to go to my lighting, go to advanced parameters, go to my scattering, and we're going to turn this down again. And so let's see, smoke scattering intensity, we're going to lower that a little bit. One thing that we also have is we have scattering occlusion. So if you want the scattering to be occluded by the smoke, you can do that as well, which is pretty cool. So now inside of our shading, we're going to go back to flames, and we're just going to keep this on a color ramp for this particular one, and because it is easier to get some decent flames in some cases. So say maybe we want like a, I don't know, like a deeper yellow, orange or something. Maybe that's pretty good. And then we're going to go to our flames translucency, and we can kind of pick this up. And so now we have a pretty decent ball of fire here. And in some cases, like the emissive masking, may not be what you want, because in this case we are reducing the temperature of the flames essentially to essentially delete the flames where there is high densities. And you can change like your frequencies and stuff of like how much masking this thing is going to do. But in this case, maybe we don't want it. And so now we have these pretty tall flames. And in some cases, you might just say, hey, I don't even want smoke, I just want flames. And so we can see how this looks on a black background. And so then we can go into here and really start tweaking this. And so now, we hop in, get our translucency level in, and you can see that whenever you have deeper colors and a wider range of colors, so say, you kind of have like a brighter orange over here, and it's fading off into a deep red and then to black, you can get some pretty decent flames. And one thing that you might want to do is you can always inverse your remap range. So maybe you want the orange to be over here and the black over here. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that on the outside of the temperature, you have that. And so then you can just kind of like tweak this, change it. And in some cases, maybe it's what you want. Maybe you want to inverse those flames or inverse that gradient to get a completely different look. So there's a lot that you can do. Like, unfortunately, I don't have like a singular way to make fire. We've kind of gone over like a couple different examples here, but you can see that you can get a ton of different looks just by playing with the temperature, by playing with the remap, by playing with the translucency settings, and then by playing with the color ramp settings. By changing these settings, you can really get some pretty crazy coloring, and so yeah, it's pretty cool. So that's that. Yeah, so that's kind of looking kind of stylized now because we have such a small ramp. It's pretty cool though. So now the last thing is kind of adding details to this. So like, let's say that we like this, but we want to try the vorticity trick on these flames. And so I'm just gonna like change this back to 1 and like 2, something like that, and then kind of increase my shaping and kind of reduce, maybe something like this. Kind of change that to make it a little bit brighter. Okay, so I kind of like where this is at. It's a little bit more stylized. It's not super realistic, but we're gonna get into the volume modulation. So this is a advanced thing here. All right. So with this. With volume modulation, we just type 1 into the box, and now we have a thing that pops up. We're going to choose vorticity in this case, and we're going to remap that to our temperature. And so what this is doing is, like I said previously, we're going to take the vorticity of the simulation, and we're going to retarget that to our temperature. And in this case, we can say that we want to either completely replace the flames with this new vorticity. Another thing that we can do is we can add a masking source. So we want the original flames to be the mask for this operation that we're going to perform. And we can do an add sub if we want to. And so then what we can do is, like, you can quickly turn the modulation on or off if you want to see the change. And so we have like a curve here that we can edit. You can make it linear, you can make it, cosine or cubic or whatever you want. You can add extra points and change that kind of stuff. And so one thing that, I like to do is change my target range to be a bit on the negative side as well. I'm going to delete these keyframes just to kind of keep it linear. And you can see that it does end up adding like some details whenever we go into here. But what we can do is, let's see, so we can kind of change like our masking target a little bit as well. And so we can change like the source range. We can change how this is being targeted. So basically the source range is saying, I want both 0% vorticity and 100% of my vorticity, and I want to map that range to, say, negative 109% and then 200% of my simulation here. And then in some cases, we might not want to have a masking source so that we can get the full effect here. And for whatever reason, I am not, such as the problem of a live stream here. Maybe I need to change my shading a little bit. Let's see. I remember that whenever I did the other simulation, I had some pretty crazy sim results. But you can see that we are affecting the detail here quite a bit. Because if we turn off the vorticity, or if we turn off this volume modulation, we can see that we have really soft flames. And then by injecting the vorticity into the temperature, we are changing quite a bit. And it is getting quite a bit noisy. So I think really the rest of this is just trying to get some good shading. And so we probably have it a little bit too orange, too yellow. So we can kind of change this, lower our shaping by flames. It looks like we probably want to increase our color remap, maybe increase our shapes. So, I mean, that looks pretty decent, you know, and we can go over here to our visuals, turn off our emitter, and so now we have some fire. And, you know, in all cases, it could be also that the vorticity is too strong, right? So we can lower, because we are injecting vorticity into the simulation, or rather into the renderer, and because of that, if it's super noisy, your result is going to be super noisy through the modulation. So, sorry, I just thought of this. And so we can get some pretty crazy, you know, stylized flame licks, and part of this is also that we have shredding. If we turn our shredding off, we can see that things change quite a bit, but shredding does increase our buoyancy and things like that. So this is kind of the gist of fire. So we're also, you know, we're going to have plenty of fire presets inside of EmberGen, you know, so that you can, you know, dissect them and kind of see how we did our shaders. Hopefully we can have a thing where we can like save our shaders. Like in this case, just to kind of look at it, we have like an exposed fire gradient. I have it reversed in this case. And then we have just some basic color remapping. We're not using transparency. We could turn transparency on and add like a little bit of extra, I guess, alpha to the flames if we wanted to in this case. You know, we can increase like our flames emission. So one thing to note is that, this is kind of like an unfortunate side of EmberGen. In some cases, it kind of depends on how you look at it. But like as you increase your fuel rate, your flames are inherently going to change, right? So we can increase this, and we can see that we're getting a lot more temperature. We could try and reduce the temperature of our emitter, but it's not really going to change much because the fire is already combusting. So then we could try and go to our thing here, and let's not do advanced parameters. We'll just say lower flame intensity. But that's not really gonna help us because the fuel is burning at like a certain rate, a certain temperature, all that stuff. So we would have to go back and change the way that we're shaping our flames, that kind of thing. And you can see like this actually looks really damn good. And it's simple, just from a color gradient and some basic color remapping, shaping our flames, and then some basic flames transparency. So it really just it kind of depends on your shading here. So that's the gist of fire. The last thing I will do is go over the backplate thing that I had here. Let me see here. Here we go. So this window fire. So how does this work? So the gist is we have a locked camera that is locked to the perspective of this window. And if you want to bring in a backplate, by the way, in the camera node, so make sure that your camera is selected up here at the top. You have a camera node, you bring in a backplate. You can also bring in an animated backplate if you wanted to. So you have like a frame rate and all that stuff for compositing. And so in this case, we have flames that are kind of going, you know, to the side and up the window. So how's that done? It is done through some shapes. So if we actually went to our emitter and said, show me the visuals, and then we go to our camera. Actually, let's just go to default. This is the actual emitter. So we have some noise being plugged into a shape blend with a smooth intersection. So we can see as we change the noise, the scale is going to change. So that's kind of how you can break up your emitter, that kind of thing. And then, yeah, we just have, I'm pretty sure it's just some boxes. So yeah, so we have some boxes. And so if we deleted these two nodes and we just plugged in just the raw shape, you can see that the noise essentially just kind of like cuts up the shape, reduces the amount of fuel that you're injecting into the simulation by creating a lot of holes, and you're going to get a lot better fire-like variation by plugging it into a blend node with a smooth intersection. And so we can just drag these in and then delete the originals and then just restart the sim, and there we go. And then through the shading is very simple as well. We have a simple color remap going on here. You can get brighter flames, more orange flames. Then we just have our color ramp as the setting, and then some flames translucency. Very simple once again to get this. And then if we go to our camera, we can see the final scene. So really cool. Somebody said, will this be available after the live session is done? Yes, it will. It will be fully recorded and ready. All right, so that's basically fire, guys. I hope that this was I hope that this was useful to you on the fire section, and hopefully that kind of gives you some ideas on how you can create fire. You know, you can emit from any shape. You typically want to have some force noise pushing things out, and then the rest just kind of works if you follow the tutorial. All right, now explosions. This is the part that I like, and here's what I'm going to teach you to make. Let's see, explosion test. So I am going to teach you essentially to make this explosion right here. And so it's kind of slow. So if you have a bad GPU, I'm sorry. We are going to optimize EmberGen, but I'm going to teach you to make this explosion. And then I will also teach you another thing where we go through trying to, let's see, yeah, so not that. So this is a simple explosion, and it's kind of ugly, but we can kind of do stuff like that as well. But I'm looking for it. Let's see, I think it's aerial explosion. This isn't perfect, the shading isn't perfect or whatever, but I'm going to show you how to create an explosion from particles as well. So let's hop into it. Let's do it. Let me drink some water, and then we're going to dive into explosions. All right. So, okay, so we're going to go to a new project, and what we're going to do, the first thing we want to do to create an explosion is set up our emitter. We want to emit a fair amount of fuel, so we're going to say maybe 220. Then we're going to go to our pressure, and we're going to emit a little bit of that too. So maybe we'll do just like a flat 25 for now and see how it happens. Then we're going to expand our voxel count to 256 cubed all the way across. You can see that things are slowing down just a little bit here for my my 3090, but if you want a big explosion, you kind of got to go big. So then what we're going to do is we're going to make this burst. And so to make it burst, we want to go to the emitter. We're going to go to activity, and we're going to click this little thing until it has a diamond for timeline override. Then we're going to hold shift over our emitter over here on the timeline, over our emitter activity. And you can see a ghost of where the key is going to be placed. And let's say maybe like frame 60 is where we're going to turn it on. And then on frame maybe 80 is where we're going to turn it off. Or actually, it's going to stay on until this particular frame, and then we're going to turn it off over here. And what we'll do is we want to double click. So we'll pause the sim, we will double click the key, and that will set our playback. Sorry, my brain is having a brain lapse here. I can't remember what you call this thing. But the little line, the indicator for where your playback line is, we want to make sure that it's on the key, and then we're going to say that it's not enabled anymore. So what this is going to do is it's just going to create a burst. But one of the big things here is in my opinion, if you want a natural explosion, you probably don't want to ignite the fuel immediately, right? So what we can do is we can go into our emission, and we will make our temperature 0. And so now we have something like this, and we're going to turn off our smoke rate as well. And we're just going to maybe increase our fuel as well. We can go into our shading, by the way, and we can check render fuel. So if we want to see our fuel in the simulation, which by the way, fuel rendering has some problems right this second. And so, but what we'll do is maybe we'll make it like a green or something like that, or maybe like a orange, and kind of like dim this a little bit so that we can see our fuel. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to ignite this after the fact. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a better custom shape for the explosion. So if we ignite this after the fact, then boom, right here, now we're going to have this shape essentially as the emitter, because that's when everything is going to take place. So we'll have a much more realistic explosion. And so what we'll do is we will expose our temperature to the timeline as well. And we'll say that it's going to be 0 right about here. And then whenever we turn it off, maybe we want to increase that to like maybe 5,000-ish. And so we'll see, and then boom, we have our explosion kind of take over. And so we probably have too much fuel, so we can lower our fuel and kind of see how that happens. And now you can see we have an explosion that kind of grows through the fuel, right, as it's consuming the fuel. So it's already much better than your typical emission pattern. And one thing we could do is we could like increase like our noise amplitude to change the shape of our explosion. So you can see this is no longer like your typical rolling explosion that just like burst upwards and all that stuff. So now we have it, it's got a nice shape. And so now let's go ahead and maybe add just a little bit more fuel, and we'll add a little bit of smoke too maybe. And kaboom. Okay, so we've got that. And what I'll do is I'll lower our pressure just a little bit. Maybe I'll turn pressure off. And I'm going to go into our simulation, go into combustion, and increase our expansion to like 40. And so that's a little bit better because I'm just trying to keep things within the bounds. If you want to go bigger and have pressure and all that stuff, go for it, have bigger bounds and whatnot. But right this second, we're just going to go to the shading portion of this now. And so one tip that I want to show you is that for the games people out there, basically, you might want something like this for a flipbook. Because there's no like trail, everything just goes upwards, and then you can frame your stuff. So we can go to like our view, so we can go to like render, we can frame this, and we can animate our camera and kind of track this plume and that kind of stuff for like a explosion sprite or whatever we want. But if you are doing something for film or compositing, this isn't particularly realistic because like where is all the stuff down here, right? So what we can do, a quick tip for you, is we can go to the Force tab in the simulation node, and we're going to turn on Block Z Ground. And what that's going to make it is so that fuel kind of gets stuck on the ground, and then also the ground is a repelling force, and it kind of aids in the explosiveness of the explosion. You can see now that like we're hitting the bounds and stuff, but I'm going to fix that after we fix our shading. So if you want that explosive look and have it so that the explosion travels along the ground instead of just immediately going up, we can see the difference again. If we turn that off, it just kind of goes upwards. So we've got that. So there we go. There's a quick tip for you to create something a bit more explosive by having the ground be a collider. All right, so now we're going to pause it, and I'm probably going to do even less fuel, honestly, maybe 90 or something like that, so that we have just something smaller that I can work with that's inbounds and looks decent for the tutorial. Okay, so it looks like 125 is pretty good, and I think that's actually a pretty decent explosion. All right, so let me find a place to pause it. I'm going to pause it right about there where it's really bright. So let's get into the flame shading. For explosions, you can use emissive masking. It's probably a good idea to do it. You can see why. You can get the very nice masking between the smoke and the density. You can change the width if you want something more stylized. And we also have a masking ramp, which is how soft it's going to be. One thing I will mention is that you can see, like we have like some ray marching artifacts. If you have that and you don't want it, you can lower your ray march step length. And also we have dithering enabled, so you can turn dithering off, and that will help as well. And so, but our ray marching step length will give you higher quality and all that stuff. But I'm going to keep it kind of high to keep the sim fast for the tutorial here. So now we have something like this. It's pretty dope, pretty cool, but I don't want anything stylized, so I'm going to increase our width. Then we're going to go over to our flames, and let's make a custom gradient for this. And so let's expose our fire color over here. We're going to drag off, add a gradient. So now we have something like that. I'm also going to go to my shading and turn off my fuel because I don't want to see my orange stuff here. And now we can just kind of play this back, and okay, I'm going to pause it again at a different spot. Now we'll take a look at this. So at the beginning, like, let's make it like a decent like yellow whitish color. And then we're going to quickly go over to a orange color. So say something pretty deep and dark, maybe like this. And maybe we want to make this like a little bit more on the orange side, like so. And so now we have, it's kind of like almost like a peachy white color. So we have that. And so now we can go into our shading again. And we want to change our shaping by flames to make this brighter, first off. And you can also do like coloring by density for the smoke, but we're not gonna do that. We're also gonna add our flames translucency. Actually, let's not right this second. So we've got this, we've got that, and so one thing I might do is I might turn off the emissive masking for this particular explosion, and we'll lower our translucency level. And a big thing is also that's affecting this is once again the scattering. So we'll go here, go to scattering advanced, and we're going to first off increase our scattering radius maybe to like 7. Then we're going to lower our smoke scattering intensity, and now we're going to see our flames. I'm going to turn down my direct light contribution for things I'm going to do in the future whenever we start coloring the smoke. So now we have this. And so you can also see we have some like ray marching bands. And once again, that is from the project settings. If you change this down to 1, like you're not going to have those bands. So just bear with it for now. We also probably want to add some more vorticity to this simulation. So we're going to go up to about 50 to start adding some detail into our flames. And we're going to change our large vorticity maybe to 16%. You don't want to go too far with it, because this is going to get us like a really nice rolling pyroclastic effect. So we're going to go here and we're going to kind of pause that. And so we have our shading once again. We're going to go to our flames, kind of change our color remap to be a little bit lower so that we can get some brighter colors out of this. Then we can see that we have like a pretty harsh gradient, so we may want to lower this just a little bit. And you can see that banding effect that's happening. So I will actually lower my my ray marching so that we have less of that for this. And so yeah, so we're kind of like getting through, tweaking it just a little bit, parameter by parameter. We can lower our translucency level if we want to. Maybe we want it to be a bit of a brighter explosion if we wanted that. And we can also turn flames translucency off. And so I'm just kind of like going back and forth to see which method is the best. So I do think that the flames translucency is probably the way to go. But for this explosion, we need some extra stuff, all right? So we'll keep our shaping up. And so I'm just kind of getting like the final colors dialed in. Then we're going to make sure that we get the details and stuff right. So now, essentially, like our temperature, the reason why this is, I guess, so, the way it is, like so even, is because we're not doing anything to break up our temperatures. So one thing we can try, first off, is we can add in a force noise. And we're going to see how this changes things. So we can see that it does add in a lot of variance. We're going to lower our amplitude quite a bit, maybe to like 0.167. And so now we have a much more detailed flame, and so that's going to kind of create some variance in our temperatures. Then also, maybe we can try and add our temperature. And so unfortunately, that kind of deleted our work that we did. over here on the temperature. So I'm just going to go back here, make this 0, make this 4100. And so, okay, so I guess doing the replace is probably the best for the explosion because it's more instantaneous. Okay, so we got that. Now we're getting some good detail. Or we're getting good detail because we added the force noise. So next, let's kind of fix our actual coloring here. I don't think our colors are the best that they could be. Maybe we want it to be a little bit more yellow. Maybe kind of tweak this just a little bit. We'll go back into the shading. Maybe we can kind of play with that a little bit. And so we do have some things like right here where there's just really, really bright temperature. And hopefully we can fix that through our modulation. So now we're going to go ahead and pause this right about there. We're going to go to volume post-process. We can also try sharpening where we could sharpen our temperature. But the problem is that it creates like some really harsh gradients and that kind of thing. So probably not going to use sharpening. The better way to do it is through our volume modulation. What we're going to do is we're going to go to noise. And so we're going to add noise. And you can see it fills our volume with smoke. We're going to say flames. And we're going to do add sub. And then we're going to make our masking source the flames. And so now we actually have some noise that we can kind of add through to the temperature. And so we're going to make our target range go into the negatives so that we kind of like cut into the flames a little bit. And so now we have something like that. It's looking pretty decent. So we can kind of like change the way that our noise is kind of remapped. And you can see the noise preview here. As we move the line, it changes different parts of the noise there. And so maybe we want something, kind of like this to get us more like some, what do you call it, like FBM type noise effect, something like that. And then we can make this cubic to make it smooth. And so we can add in some extra details if we want. So yeah, we can change like our noise scale. We'll make it a little bit lower. So we have a lot more detail in the flames as well. But we do have that banding issue from our ray marching. So we'll max out our ray marching for this. It's going to be kind of slow though. And so let me also turn off like my skybox and whatnot, and we'll kind of tweak this gradient a little bit more because I'm not really satisfied. I kind of like that a little bit better. I'm more of a oranges type guy whenever I go for my fire and whatnot. So that's not too bad, honestly. That's not too bad of a simulation, I don't think, or shading. And so, but I'm going to go to my project settings. I don't know. I keep going back and forth. So by the way, if your simulation is running slow, you can just increase your ray march step length, and that will give you some pretty significant boosts in performance, by the way. And so yeah, like that is kind of our first explosion here. So how can we add some extra detail to this, or like extra in like the way that it's spawning and that kind of thing? So we can add a collider. We're going to bring this through, and we're going to add a particles. And so what we want to do is we want to kind of rip the fuel up a little bit. So we're going to go to particle control. I'm going to go to velocity cone, and I'm going to change maybe my speed scale a little bit. I'm going to make my max speed maybe like 65, my min speed like 55. So now you can see we have some really fast particles. And so we're also going to change like our burst size here. Oh, whoops, looks like that's completely messing up my fuel. It might be a little bit too fast. So we'll actually change the speed scale back to 1. Yeah, so that kind of solves that. But then we want to emit the particles at a specific time, maybe like at the beginning here. So what we can do is we can add this particle emission over here. And so we'll just say it's going to be off at this point. And then at this one, we'll double click that. And then we'll emit it. So boom. And now you can see we kind of get some tearing through the simulation, right? And so that's going to give us a different shape, and it's going to change the way that the explosion is forming. And so we can kind of like change our seed. We're going to change our cone spreading so that it's wider. And so now we have something like that. And now you kind of get some trails, and that can help you really guide where you want the explosion to go. And so we can also kind of go through and see what this is going to do on the full scale. So we're going to crank this up to 512. It's going to be a bit slower here. So kaboom, we've got that. And now it's kind of rolling through up to the top. And we can see it fades out quite nicely, which is pretty cool. Another thing we can do is, like, it might be a thing where you don't want any flames translucency at all, right? So typically, right, with flames translucency, which I guess I should have thought of this before, and this is why pre-recorded tutorials are good, because I can go through and make sure that everything's are good. And I try to do a lot of explosions before this, but so with bigger explosions, you really might be better off doing some emissive masking, no flames translucency, and you can see that this actually, I mean, it looks quite nice. You got a big rolling explosion. We can go through, we can tweak our scattering in this case again, and kind of change this up a little bit. Maybe reduce our occlusion, or we could increase our occlusion. And one thing we could do is we can go into the scene node, we can go into colors, bloom intensity, if we wanted to, and kind of increase the bloom on this. And so now we have like a really big rolling explosion. And one thing you can do, like just to show you that you can kind of like tweak anything, is we could do tweaking the bloom radius. So we can go over here. We can say, all right, like at the beginning, I want it to be huge, but then like as it gets over here, I want to, go down to 0 or whatever. And also, if you want to expose like a curve editor, you can do that as well. And so we can like hide our emission stuff, we can hide our particles, and maybe we want to change the curve of the bloom radius, that kind of thing. So you can do that. So we'll play the simulation and kind of see how this works. And maybe it's too bloomy up to that point, so we want to reduce our bloom down to, say, 0. So we'll do this, something like that. So it's pretty nifty if you wanted to change things. So we'll make this bigger again, and then also with the colliders, you can turn those off, and we don't want them to emit light either. And so boom, now you've kind of got a nice rolling explosion. Sure, I can upload this file for you, and actually what I'll do is I'll upload my other explosion that has a little bit better shading. And so one thing also that we'll notice is that now, like within this explosion, I think the particles come out like a little bit too late. So we can go here and hide our bloom radius, and what we can do is zoom in to our line here. And so we'll go something like this. And we'll make that. All right. Maybe that's a little bit too soon. So we can just kind of tweak this. So this is the cool thing about the timeline and timing some of your events and that kind of thing. So this is a pretty cool, pretty nifty explosion. Now the last thing that's also really, really important to your explosion is your smoke shading. Your smoke shading is very important. So if we bring back our lighting and all this stuff. So one thing is, we have lighting intensity. Lighting intensity is going to affect how your simulation is looking inherently. You can also inherit sun color. Typically, you may or may not want to inherit your sun color, but you can also change like your light color, this kind of thing. You can make it orange, or like a deeper color or something like that to kind of add some additional coloring to the smoke if you wanted. We can change our inherent sun color, but the thing is, if you change the light color, you do need inherent sun color on. You can change like your azimuth and kind of like frame up your explosion. I like to do it where I'm getting like some really nice diagonal shadows and that kind of thing. One thing you can also do if you're just trying to edit your smoke is you can turn your flame and scattering rendering off and then just edit the smoke now. So we can go to our smoke. One cool thing is, we can do a color ramp once again, you know, with our stuff here. So we've got like a min color, a max color. So, you know, for instance, you know, you can make it green, and then you can make like the other color red. And so now it's going to kind of lerp between those colors there. And so we can do, say, just 1, and it's going to be like a perfect lerp. And you can kind of see how remapping works on a much more intuitive level. But we could change this to be like a deeper, you know, darker brown, red, or something like that. And then have this over here, you know, be more on like the gray side. So then you can get like some multicolored smoke, and have it be a little bit more maybe, you know, different colors here. So maybe we would like this for some reason in our smoke, or, you know, maybe you want like a bluish hue if it's like gunpowder or something like that. So we have that. And so now we can see that we actually have some pretty decent color variation within the smoke. And so we can kind of, you know, tweak that. And then you can also change your smoke density clamp. So if you want really soft smoke, you could change the density clamp to be really low. So typically anything like below 20 is 20% is whenever it's going to start changing. So you might want flames to shine through a little bit more. Somebody said, can you mask the bottom so the ground collision is softer? Yes, you can. Holy bloom. I'm going to turn my skybox off. And actually, I'm going to turn my bloom off as well. Yes, I want to delete. I don't want any bloom at all. Okay, so back to my skybox. So, by the way, you need a skybox for your sun to actually work. Motion vectors do not work yet. Making them in Slate is the way to go, in my opinion, until we do like an optical flow solution or something like that. So yeah, so we've got this, and then also like just note that as you're changing your smoke shading over here, and you have something say like inherent sun color on, it is going to be inheriting your sun color. Like, you know, so like this is the true coloring, and we probably have inherent sky color on too, so we can turn that off in our ambientness. One thing we can do also with like ambient occlusion to some degree, like in our lighting, is we can like increase our shadowing. You know, you can go like crazy if you want, probably like 5,000%. Doesn't change a whole lot, but it does change the shadowing in the ambience over here. But then if you want like true ambient occlusion, inside of our shading, we have an AO node, and you can change like the overall occlusion. So we have like, you know, direct light occlusion, max occlusion, you know, emissive max occlusion. So you can occlude your emissiveness. You can change the tinting of this. So if you wanted it to be, you know, more like a red AO, or maybe like a more of like a fiery AO, you can change that as well. And so you can really get in with the advanced parameters and get some pretty neat stuff here. And so let me turn our scattering contribution on, render flames. But one thing to note is that it is occluding, which something got borked here. Is it? Huh, nice. My flame rendering doesn't work anymore. And I don't know why. Flames. Where did you go? Hey guys, I found a problem with the software. My flames disappeared. Okay. This is why 075 isn't publicly released yet. All right. Well, that's bizarre. I don't know why it's not showing. I didn't change much. But anyway, so you can get some really nice smoke, and just imagine that it looks good with flames. I don't know where my flames are, unfortunately. Let's see. Okay, maybe it was my emissive masking for some reason, changing things. That's a pretty dope explosion. So yeah, so now we can go to our scattering. I don't know why the emissive masking kind of broke that. We can go back and turn our AO on though. We can change our scattering. And so in this case, this is where scattering occlusion can work. So no occlusion, we can probably boost this up to maybe 30. There we go. And so now we have some pretty cool flames as well. So yeah, like I like this look. You know, you got some different colored smoke. You got some pretty cool fire. We can go back to our emissive masking. Maybe change this width is what we need to do. Yeah, and so there we go. And so now we've got a pretty neat explosion. And then once again, we can press B to like sear bounds. One thing we could do is like, let's go a little bit bigger. We're going to go bigger on stream here. And we're going to do our force noise, maybe do like 50 for our fuel. All right, so we'll see this and see if this kind of changes the size of our explosion. So there we go. But I think that it kind of makes our fuel, we probably need more fuel because we have more velocity now. A lot more velocity for that matter. So there we go. So there's our explosion. It's huge, it's rolling, and it's bright. And so there's that. Like there's a pretty decent explosion. And then the last thing, if we go to combustion, we can lower like our flame intensity if we didn't want it to burn as much or whatever. You can do like the advanced parameters. I'm not really going to mess with those because in general these little parameters are pretty well tuned, I think. But if you lower your flame intensity, it is going to lower your burn temperature, and you probably want to like reduce the smoke generated and that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's kind of the gist of this type of explosion. So yeah, pretty cool. And like I said, I will upload. I'm not going to upload this particular one because it's kind of funky. Can you show the camera tracking for flipbooks? Yeah. So let me tweak this explosion just a little bit, real quick, guys. All right. So let's see. We'll lower this. We'll do something like that. Make sure that it's running faster. It is. Okay, camera tracking. So if you're doing camera tracking, we do not want to push off of the ground. So let's go ahead and restart this. Boom. So like let's just say that that's nice and that we want it. And what we'll do is we'll go to force. We're going to increase our buoyancy, increase our smoke dissipation so the flames burn a little bit better. Maybe increase our generated smoke. Increase our flame intensity. Okay, so I think that this is like a decently trackable thing, and I'm going to lower our force by quite a bit as well, honestly, so that we get a better thing that we can track. Okay, so that's something a little bit more trackable. I'll lower this a bit, and we'll lower our fuel. Sorry, I'm just trying to get something that's nice and rolling so that we can track it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our render, and we're going to go to our camera. And so we have our position essentially, and what we're going to do is we're going to add the position to the timeline. And so let me hide that thing. And so what we can do is we're going to not go to the curve. And so we're going to just go to our Z. And so we're going to set our Z at some specific place. And we probably want to make this curve linear. So we'll go to interpolation mode, and we'll do linear, which that's one big thing that you couldn't do in the previous EmberGen, right? And so now we're going to kind of change this. And so, yeah, so, and then probably, oh, whoops. Yeah, so let's see. We're waiting for our explosion to start. Or maybe I'm like way too high already. Yeah, okay. So, hang on. I'm going to delete these keys because like our manual keyframing isn't like perfect yet. And so I'm going to zero out my position. I'm going to zero out all my other stuff. And so now I'm going to just zoom out so that we have a perfect side view. Okay. And if we wanted to view like a different side, which I don't know why my, let's go to my scene. We'll go to camera 1. I don't know why if somebody can tell me on my team, like why we don't have like a pivot transform anymore. That'd be nice. Okay. Yeah, so I don't know what's going on with my pivot transform. So I'm sorry, Thomas. I'm sorry. My camera's like completely fucked right now. So I don't know if I can show it to you because my pivot and stuff isn't working. But basically, like what you would do, like I'll just quickly animate something just to show you the gist though. All right, so we'll do this. We'll go here. We'll add something to Z. We'll do this, and we'll say okay. Let's stop that. We'll go up, right? And so now, as the explosion happens, you can kind of track the plume, and you would just match the camera transition up to that. So if we go to our render, we can kind of see here. Just imagine this is in the center. Imagine that this starts like right at the explosion. You have the cross, and then you can kind of like maybe time things so that they're a little bit better. So there we go. So that would be how you track something. Hopefully that answers your question, Thomas, and hopefully when we release the build, our pivots and stuff will be fixed so that things happen. Lucas says, is there a quick tip to simulate a slow burning object? My advice for you would be to bring in a curtain with, so hang on, I'll show you. We'll do something like this. We'll do animation. By the way, if you need an animated mesh, it's called the animation node right this second. And so then, let's see, other, I guess, mask 1. So you can do vertex colors, right? And then you can change the vertex color value. So like essentially you would start it at 0 so that there's like nothing happening. And then you would just animate it. So you would have like a gradient on the curtain. And then as you change your reference value for the vertex color, the emitter would kind of like go, like just imagine that it would like, you know, go up and the emitter would kind of change and grow. I can give you like an example to kind of like show you how something like that would work with like blend shapes as well. So like, let's go to our scene. We will go and we'll do like a box as like our fire emitter here. And I'm going to change my simulation to be fairly wide, but kind of shallow, just to keep it kind of performant here. Okay, so we have that. And I'm going to like max out my size, and I'm going to lower this right here. And so we have that. So now, like, imagine we wanted the flames to come from this corner over here and like go over the primitive. So what we can do is we can do a blend, and we will do like, let's say a cylinder as my other primitive. So we'll say a cylinder. We'll go over here and we will do this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my emission activity. And so now you can see like where I move the cylinder. It doesn't seem like it, but where I move the cylinder, actually hang on. Yeah, hang on, smooth intersection. Maybe we'll do add. Okay, so you can kind of see what this thing does, right? So smooth intersection, smoothness. Okay, yeah, so all right, so it is what I thought it was. Okay, so where the cylinder is essentially, actually I was messing with the wrong primitive. Let's do 0. And actually I'm just gonna plug this back in real quick, and we're gonna lower this box here. Okay, so now we've got our blend modifier. We're gonna turn off that. So now if we expand the radius of our thing here, so if we go over here to the corner, right, we can do this. And one thing we can also do to like make this even more advanced is add some noise, and we'll do smooth intersection again. So we'll do this. So now we've got noise on our masking shape, and the thing is like this, like you might say, oh well, like yeah, but it's not like couldn't I just use a cylinder that expands in this case? You could. So like maybe it's a torus or something. And then, as we expand, or sorry, this is still a cylinder. And by the way, you can name your node. So you can say like main shape. So in this case, like I'm getting confused. Then we can say mask, right? And then mask noise, right? So you can rename nodes if you want to, by the way. And then in this case, we could also say, just as another quick tip, we can say, emission shape blend system or something, right? So now you can group that for artists in the future who are opening your preset or something like that. So, okay. So what we're going to do is now we're going to animate this. So we will get our radius and we're going to say you are 0 at first. And then as we go through the simulation, you said that you want it slow. So we'll go to like frame 320 and then we'll say 50 or something. Looks like we need more than that. So 150. Oh, 150. Okay, there we go. So now we have a shape that goes kind of like that. So maybe we'll do like 100. Okay, and then we'll draw this out even more. So we'll do something like that. Okay, so now this is going to be slow. Right this second, John, like our exports are just broken entirely. So like if you're using 0.75 and like motion vectors aren't working like they used to, it's probably just broken, honestly. Okay, so we'll go back to our activity, and now you can see that we have some stuff getting emitted. And so what we'll do is we will increase our fire here, right? And we can also change like our noise scale a little bit. And then what we'll do is we will make this animated so that we get some differing stuff. And we can change like our seed or whatever. So now we have some pretty cool fire. And so now if we turn off our emitter visualizer, you can see that fire is going to like propagate across this thing. So imagine that you did this with like a custom mesh like in the main shape, and then that would allow you to create a custom mask that kind of, does its thing. Then of course, if we go to our shading, we can very quickly get some really good fire here. And so do something like that, go to our sim, maybe we want some shredding to make it kind of like more of something that's like a little bit raging. Go to buoyancy, increase that. And then, maybe go to our fuel, kind of lower it a little bit. And then we want less translucency and maybe some more flame shaping. I don't know. And then we probably want to add like some more like force noise and whatnot. And then want to add some noise in our simulation. Maybe we want to add it maybe on like a larger scale to make it kind of like wind and kind of, 10 or something. So there you go. So if it's like on a larger scale, you can do something like that and kind of change your stuff. So hopefully that answers your questions for a blend shape. Okay, so I haven't really been reading the chat much. So let me just go up real quick, and I'm going to see if anybody said anything in particular. Is there a mix node to work between emitters? Unfortunately not. You just have to click each singular emitter node. Matthew. What about doing Super Saiyan auras on skeletal meshes? Yes, it's possible. Is sliced export a thing now? Not yet, but we hope so in the future. Will we be able to create custom controls? I'm not sure what that means besides presets, but I mean, you will be able to like have custom like node graph stuff in the future. Okay. Yeah. Just seems like people talking about Blackbody, etc. Okay, so does anybody else have any particular questions on the tutorial? Like, I hope that I went through stuff. I think the only thing I didn't do was like an aerial explosion. So let's get that done. We're coming in at the 2-hour mark, which was what like my planned schedule was for this tutorial. So okay. So first off, if we want to make an aerial explosion, we need some particles. And by the way, let's see. So yeah, so we got particles. I wonder if I have collisions in this one. I don't know. I don't think I do. But anyway, okay. So we have our particles, and we want like let's do like a flak explosion or something like that. So if we want that, let's change our velocity range to velocity cone, which basically says we're going to emit a certain velocity in a cone. We'll do 75 and like 25. So we'll have some pretty quick explosive stuff. And we're going to change our cone spreading to 180 so that we have things coming out in a full circle. We're going to change our pool size. And now we have like a really quick burst. That's great. And so now, like I think we'll change like our min and max shrinking so that they shrink out fully. Let's go ahead and increase our sim bounds like so. Let's kind of reduce that. Apply. Reduce that to 256. Okay, so now we have something that's kind of like equal bounds. Okay, and now we can reduce our particle life as well to kind of reduce the distance that they go. So we'll just keep reducing until they disappear at the time we want them to, because we want to kind of keep them in the bounds roughly. Okay, so this right here is going to be the basis of our explosion. So now inside of our emitter, we need some more fuel, most definitely. And then in this case, we probably want some pressure as well, right? So boom, we have more pressure. More pressure is going to mean more fuel and more temperature and all that stuff. So it's pretty good. So we got a nice little burst there. Hell, we'll probably go even more. Okay, so we've got something like that. And now what we want is we definitely want probably even more fuel. The thing is when particles move so fast, they tend to kind of skip a little bit, as you can see with substeps. We hope to have substeps in the future. And then also, which by the way, do we have like a auto loop function yet? I don't think we do. Yeah, so it's not going to reset. Like, let's see, time control, loop simulation. No, repeat simulation. Okay, yeah, so repeat simulation doesn't work yet, unfortunately. Because otherwise, I wouldn't have to keep pressing R. So anyway, I'll turn my looping off too. So we have our base here. And one thing that we might want, so by the way, like I told you guys, if you want a zero gravity explosion, and by the way, if you want like a flipbook texture and you don't want it to roll, and you're doing it for your game, this is probably a pretty good example of like a nice explosion. And then we can go to our emitter, make sure that our visuals turn off show emitter. So we have something like that, right? So it's pretty cool. And yeah, Artist Cafe, if your revenue is under $1 million, then the hobby or indie license, same thing, should give you access. And if you're a studio with more revenue than that, then you can still get access to the build. So okay, so we have this, but let's kind of turn our force, our buoyancy on just a little bit. We're going to make sure that this is like a larger scale flak explosion or something. We probably want some pretty good smoke as well, so that it's a little bit less burny. And so now let's go ahead and work on our shading a little bit. So we've got like this really big bright piece. Let's go over to like maybe like this side right here. That looks pretty cool. So we'll go to our shading. We'll go to our flames. We can we'll do emissive masking for this one as well, something like that. I'm going to go to my lighting. I'm going to do advanced parameters. I'm going to turn our smoke scattering intensity down. We're going to turn our flames way up and kind of like remap our colors, something like that with just our base color ramp. And then what we'll do is we'll go into our simulation combustion, and we're going to make sure that it generates more smoke. Something like that. Okay, and so now within our shading, we have something like that. So I think that looks pretty decent. For something like this, we could get away with not using masking and instead using our translucency. So it kind of appears like, in general, guys, like you want to use like either or, depending. And I think, like, let's test something on the stream here just real quick. If we do an exposed color gradient for this, and of course we expose that to the node graph, we do a color gradient, we go over here and we change this to be like a brighter color, and then we do this, like, let's make this like really dark, just like that, and then we'll go over here, do something like that, and then we have something like this. Okay, so it's not quite what I thought it would do. Hang on, let's see. I think I need it to fade out too. Yeah, so you can get like some extra detail by adding like a darker gradient in the center like that, and we can kind of remap this maybe a little bit smoother or better. But yeah, it's kind of up to you, I think, on what you'd want to do with your shading. So yeah, we'll probably remove that too. Just keep it smooth. So yeah, I think that in this case, emissive masking is probably your best bet then. So yeah, because typically the translucency is best for, what do you call it, your like standalone flames or something like that. But if you're doing like an explosion with a lot of like dense smoke and stuff, then you're probably gonna want to do like your emissive masking. Yeah, so let's see. After Conflict says that's definitely relevant to us. Thanks for the example. In terms of things like grenade explosions for games, are there any particular tips you'd give for realistic simulation, whether it be particles, the explosion itself, dust, etc.? So, all right, so let me think if I was going to make some assets for like a grenade. Let's see, I would probably make this fade out a lot faster, first off. So we'll go into our simulation. We're going to go to combustion. We're going to do smoke dissipation, and we're going to bump that way up. So we can do that and make this fade out a lot quicker. And so, like, let's imagine that this is going to be a flip book, and we can just go ahead and let me choose a folder, say test. Okay. So we'll do export now. Oh, I'm going to crash. Nice. So it appears that exporting crashes, so I can't actually show you the thing, and unfortunately I lost my explosion. Ah, shit, I should have recovered it. Oh no, why did I do that? Is it gonna let me recover? No. Okay. Rip, I just lost my recovery file. Okay. Oh well. So yeah, so if I was doing like a grenade explosion or something like that, so you know, one thing is, you know, maybe if you wanted like some streaks or something first off, so, you know, you would have like a dust type explosion. So if I was going to do that, the first thing I would do is go over here, do some particles. I personally really like the cone method of velocity, especially for something like this. We're going to go to our emitter. We're going to say no fuel. We're going to say a lot of smoke. We'll just max this out for now, if we can. And so now we have that, and then what we'll do is we're going to make sure that our particles do their shrinking over life, which is going to be great. So we have that, and then I'm having like some weird issues with my thing here. We're going to do max capsule stretching as well. Then we're going to do like a really high velocity, like 75 again. I really don't go over 75 much, So now we have something like this, right? And so we're going to try and do like a nice burst or something. And so what we can do is actually, I will make a collider, and I'm going to plug this into the collider. So if I was doing an explosion, that's kind of how I would do it. So we want to kind of rip through these things here. Maybe increase my friction or repulsion, velocity transfer, something like that. Okay, and I think that's probably too fast. So we'll do like maybe 25 and 45. This is a method that used to work in EmberGen. So I'm trying to see if it still works, because it would be my preferred method of doing this. And we're going to expand our cone. I don't think it's working terribly well. Okay, yeah, so I would just stick with doing the particles as the emitter. Sorry, I was trying something. Okay, so we have our thing here. And then we want to change our lifetime to like, I don't know, 0.3 and 0.5 or something. Even quicker. 0.1, 0.15 as the lifetime for these. Okay, so now we have that. And so we definitely want them to be faster. And so we can also change like our min size and max size to be a little bit smaller. So this is like if you wanted like some cool trails, or like something that's kind of explosive here, if you can see what I'm doing here. All right, so then we'll go to our emitter. Maybe we'll do forces, and we're going to do velocity transfer. Okay. And so what that's going to do is it's going to make sure that it transfers that velocity. And then I'm going to go to pressure, and I'm going to add some pressure to this. But I'm going to make my random scale just 1. Okay. So now you can see we kind of have like a dirt type explosion. So what we can do quickly is shade this. Okay. So we're going to shade this like a dirt color or something. We'll go like this, and I don't know. That's dirt enough, I think, for now. So we've got that, and so now let's go ahead to our simulation, and we're going to change our sim size up a bit, like so. So we want it to be a bit wider, and so now you can see what we have. We've got like a nice velocity type explosion going on. We're gonna go to our particles. I don't know why. Oh, it's because my max life changed. 0.1, 0.15. Okay, so we'll do like 0.25 to make them last a bit longer. Okay, so we don't need bounds as big as we have now, so we can speed up our sim again. We probably don't need it as high either. Okay, so now we have something like that. And then we could just add more particles if we want. So we can increase our pool size, something like that. And then if we want it to go even faster, I would probably even go maybe up to 75 now, like I originally thought. And so boom, now you've got that. And so now you could use this for like the particles. Yeah, and we could change like the min and max speed. Like Ben said. And then there's also like some other stuff that you can do, like kind of like lower your shrinking values and things like that. So not all of them shrink fully. But then you get like some mushroom clouds like that. If you wanted to reduce that, you can reduce your velocity transfer. And so now we have something kind of like that, which is pretty dope. Maybe let's do even more particles. So something like that is pretty cool. Increase our cone spreading, you know, so now we've got that. That's really cool. And, you know, maybe we wanted to make it, you know, like concrete or something. So we can do something a little bit more gray. And then inside of our smoke, we can lower our density clamp. So say something like this. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, like if I was doing this would be pretty good for a flip book. And if you don't want as much roll, like upwards, if you wanted to kind of keep it in frame. So we'll go to our render, right? So like, let's see how this would look for our flip book. We'd probably do like this side. And so we'd probably keep it like on the bottom, honestly, if it was like a grenade, you know what I'm saying? And you would like scale your sprite like upwards or something. And so yeah, I'd probably do something like this, and we could turn off the emitter so that we don't see that. And now we just have that, and now it just kind of rolls up. And then what I would do, since this is like far too many frames, is I'd go to my simulation, and then where's that? Combustion, and we would turn up our smoke dissipation quite a bit. And so we can do that, which is really cool. And so boom, then your smoke dissipates a lot quicker. And now you kind of have like your quick burst. And then, you know, if you wanted to, you can always kind of like expand on this and actually, you know, do fuel emission if you wanted to make this kind of like explosive, or if you wanted to have like any scattering or something like that from your explosion. So like one thing you can do, like in our render passes, we can do say like just our scattering. So you could have a scattering pass on your smoke if you wanted to add that in like for extra effect on the grenade or whatever. So hopefully that kind of helps out with games in how I would do stuff. And then of course, if I was making like an explosion, like the explosive part for like the main bit, I'd probably do a shape primitive. I'd do like a sphere. I'd probably blend some noise into it, like so. And so now like we can like visualize our emitter real quick. And so we'll see, so we'll say show emitter, and then maybe increase like my scale a little bit, and we can add like some more octaves, increase like my linearity, kind of change my amplitude. And so now we have like a really nice sphere. Now we have far too much emission. So we'll do this, we'll lower that. And we have far too much pressure too. So I'd probably do something like really small. And then like typically if I'm doing something for a game, I typically look at the top down view because then you're not going to have any upward motion, which is really nice. So then we'll go to our emitter, we'll do activity. And so what we can do is we'll kind of like delay the explosion a little bit. And so we'll say, actually, yeah, let's do that. So yeah, so we'll time it something like that. But now we can make it more explosive and pretty. So we can go to our force noise. We can do something like 50 is probably what I would do. Right, so now you're going to get like a really nice burst. We can look inside of our render view. And let's go to our, which does that automatically select camera? I think it does. Okay, yeah, so we can go over here, kind of frame this in, right? And so now we've got that. But if we wanted it to be, say like more of like a radial explosion, one thing we can do to help would also be like add in a line force, and we could add in like some repel strength, or like maybe additional pressure like around the line. We can also do like a repel strength. And now that's going to kind of give us something that's a little bit more radial instead of just the noise alone. So that'll kind of give us some extra shapes that we might like. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you definitely want to do it from the top view. And of course, like let's kind of see how we can get some good shading in this. Just to kind of reiterate. So we'll bring up like our flame shading. And maybe in this case, we want some actual translucency. We'll go to our lighting and then go to scattering. And of course, reduce our scattering a little bit. Or we could do like maybe just like more occlusion and a higher scattering radius. And then like lower that a little bit. So now we have something like that. But the thing is like this is where retiming is going to come in like a lot on our simulations, where like we have like this like really slow like burning fire or whatever, and maybe we would want it to be you know, a lot more violent and explosive for like the first, you know, however many frames, first 40 frames, compress those down into 10, and then like we slowly like render out the smoke. So, you know, that's one big thing that's going to change how you're going to do flipbooks as well. It's like right now this is a bit slow, and like if your engine supports it, like I know Unreal does, like you can speed up and like retime it manually. But if we wanted something, you know, that you know, was like a bit quicker already. Like we can lower like our flame intensity. We can also lower like our fuel emission itself, right? And that'll kind of help us burn a little bit faster. You could also increase the temperature, I think, and that would kind of make it burn faster. But like in general, if we want to do this too, we can also go to Combustion and Advanced Parameters. And this is where you can, let's see, Combustion Flames Gain. We can lower that. We probably want to keep that. We want to max out our fuel loss. Maybe we can do like 500. And yeah, I think our combustion's kind of like borked right this second, honestly. That's why at the beginning of the stream I said that we should rework our combustion, because I don't think it works precisely well. But anyway, I hope that answers your question for doing things for games. You know, like I would generate like an explosive type velocity asset from the side or something. You know, I would do things top down if it's like an explosion. And then of course, if you want like a, you know, a rolling bit, you can always, you know, track like something from the side or whatever it happens to be. Let me open up another one, like one of my big ones. Let's see, explosion test. So our big scene here. So yeah, so like we have something like this. You can get some pretty neat extra detail, which I'm going to upload this one to our Discord server. And by the way, like see, you can get extra details in like your temperature by like remapping temperature to temperature and then creating a custom curve for it. And then of course, like without the vorticity into the flames, you can see the difference in detail. And we're replacing it, and we have like a different target range. So you definitely want like that negative target range for extra detail if you're using vorticity in there. So yeah, like that's kind of the detail. And I think we're also doing like emissive masking and no translucency. So it's pretty cool. And in this case, like if it was for games, I would probably turn off the ground collision in hopes that it would go upwards a little more if you wanted like catch like the rolling cloud or something. And yeah, so see, so now like in this case, now you have the smoke and stuff that essentially you could probably crop it out. Another great tip for the games people is you can do mask shapes as well. So if we go to our scene here and we do a sphere, which actually, does it work? Slicing mask, volume post-process. I think we have to add it to our modulation here. So we'll do masking shapes SDF, and we'll do, I think, yeah, we'll do add sub, and then we'll do masking source of smoke. Maybe, or maybe replace, I think. Hang on. I don't know exactly how to get it to work. It's a bit more complicated than it used to be. If Guild is in the chat and he knows how to make it work, let me know. But basically, like, you should, in theory, be able to mask your simulation so that wherever it is, like in your primitive, is where you would be able to, you know, so it's kind of like how we have like a roof height and stuff. Like you can fade out and create like a custom alpha mask essentially for your render with custom shapes. And so you could have like a really noisy shape, or maybe you generate like a custom like bubbly you know, mesh or something, and then you want to import that into EmberGen and use that as your mask. You can like mask out your stuff that way. And so, but for some reason it appears that I cannot do what I wanted to do with the masking. So sorry about that. That's something that we'll have to look into. So any other questions that you guys have for this tutorial? I think I've gone over like the basics for pretty much everything. You know, I've gone over like the sim node and your shading, like how to get really good shading. You know, like we can look at like this flamethrower shading real quick, kind of see what the details are for getting something like this. So let's see. Looks like we've got AO active. We've got some pretty decent scattering. We've got a lot of flames contribution inside of our scattering in this case. And then for our flames, pretty decent remap settings. It doesn't look like we're actually doing masking. We could do masking, which actually looks kind of a bit better, huh? So you can do something like that. You know, change your width, that kind of thing. So this is a pretty nice flamethrower with our new particle collisions. Which you can't, I'm not sure where my my settings are for the particle collisions, but they're happening. So yeah, so it's pretty good to get some shading. And like the good news is, guys, is you know, we're gonna have hopefully over 100 presets when 0.75 like fully launches. You will be able to you know, just quickly change something. So like in this case, like if I were going to change something, I'll show you this just real quick. We'll do this, we'll lower this, expand that, maybe expand that, click apply. We're going to delete our particles. We're going to add something like this. And so now like that shading is automatically applied to an explosion, right? And then like if you want to, like you might want to change, since there's like so much extra happening here, you know, maybe like reduce our fuel rate a little bit, right? And then maybe we want to change like our masking a little bit as well, to allow more to kind of let through. And so there we go. Like, so that's kind of like how you can like quickly reuse something. And so you can see the difference between like the explosions that I taught you and just using like a sphere emitter and turning it on and off, right? Because like if you do something like this and say just animate the explosion, like that's cool, but you know, and so by the way, like you can click and kind of fake your explosion. One thing that I don't know, which my team was telling me about this node, but I don't know how it works. Shape burst. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what it does. I don't even know how to use it yet, so. Amount of spheres. Huh. Can I visualize this? Yeah. So apparently we have a new shape thing that allows us to do bursts. Oh, there we go. I think it's having some issues though. I'm not sure. So this is going to be pretty cool for some maybe additional custom explosions and stuff. But I don't know how to get it to work, honestly. I have no clue. I think it's a bit complicated. We'll have to figure it out. But other than that, guys, that's... Yes, it has been asked a million times, and yes, it's going to be available to Otoy subscribers. Absolutely. It's just not available yet because it's a different build system, and we don't have enough time to fiddle around with 2 different builds. So we just have it for people who are licensed from us directly. They can get it on Discord, and then whenever 0.75 launches, you will be able to do your thing. And so I guess my last thing is I'll just kind of close out and show you a couple cool presets that you can get with some crazy fire shading. So you've got like some magic darts, you know, here's like a cool GPU particle thing. We've got like I call it Enigma. So you can do some pretty rad stuff with GPU particles and negative pressure, which is what this is. You know, so we'll have all kind of stuff. And we've got like our oscillator node, you know, giving us some really cool, you know, changing like the radius of a torus. So like if we go over here and see like our visuals, we can see that the torus is kind of like changing. It's changing how the particles are spawning, kind of giving us some cool stuff there. Let's see. I have magic thing. So, yeah, this is a cool, nifty little thing here. Which, by the way, we can do upscaling with a faster upscaler now. So see if I turn the fast upscaler off. Oh, it's actually faster. Interesting. Anyway, so you can do upscaling, all that stuff. And then we have like this poison bomb thing that we're going to have as a preset. This is also using oscillators to change the radius of like a cylinder. This also shows how you can get like multicolored smoke. It's a bit more stylized if you wanted that. We've got, let's see, I call this prism. It's similar to the other one, but it has more like of a rainbow effect. And one thing I'm curious about, just because I'm on here, I'm kind of going like out of the tutorial now. We're done with the tutorial, I think. But let's see, what is it? Style, chromatic aberration. Yeah, so you can aberrate your particles. So we can do something like this, which is a pretty neat effect. I really like that. Yeah, so you can do some really cool stuff in EmberGen now. So that's pretty dope, actually. I kind of like that. So yeah, so you can do some really cool things with particles. Our extra shaders that we have over here. You can do pixelized stuff. So by the way, if you want to do some cool things, you can do that. David Kibber says, will we ever be able to adjust the camera angles for 6-point lighting? Maybe, but it's not necessarily camera angles. It's more like the spotlights, and you can adjust the spotlights and that kind of thing. Let's see. We've got like a little torch fire. And so, by the way, like with the fire stuff in the tutorial, like your starting shape really depends on, you know, like how your fire is going to look. Eli, if you have a license, you can download this build as a pre-release because it's not public yet. You can download it as a pre-release from our Discord server if you have a license. If you do not have a license, you will have to wait until this is released publicly. No, you can use a 3080, a 3070. I mean, my laptop has a 3070. It runs EmberGen great. One of the guys that we hired, he's an optimization specialist. We really hope to get back to it where like a 1070 or something like that is our minimum requirement. So yeah, I mean, you can get a real-time output. It's just the bigger your sim is, the kind of worse it's going to be. But yeah, so let's see. Yeah, so I mean, EmberGen, it runs pretty good. Here's a neat sim that's showing some cool smoke stuff. This one's pretty cool. I quite like it. Let's see, force line, twist strength with a fall off. Let's make a whirlpool. Yeah. So there's so much stuff you can do. Like I hope to do a lot more tutorial streams. Which, by the way, guys, like in the comments, if you could you tell me like some more tutorials that you'd like to see? Like today we kind of covered fire, we kind of covered some explosions, that kind of thing. Like there is more to it, but you know, like it just depends. Oh, hang on. Let me show you a different build here with particles to show something else that we're able to do now. Okay. Hang on. There we go. Now it's loading. Okay. So we have this. So let me open up the rocket spam again. So now we have it so that which this is a big thing that I wasn't able to show when doing other particle stuff, is now our particles are world space. So if you want to do like, a trail of rockets like this, or you want to, like in this case, we're moving the particle emitter. You can do all kinds of stuff, which is really cool. So yeah, and like we can make them, magical. So one thing I didn't get into is like magic colored flames and stuff like that. Which in this case, I don't know why that's not being affected by the color. It's kind of weird. Huh. Mysterious. Oh, you know why? Because I bet it's collider color. Yeah. So you can make some stuff like magical if you want. You can go over here to the smoke shading. We can make this like a little bit. Actually, I'll tell you what. We'll do like a color ramp. We'll do a min color of like a darker green, and then we'll do like a red poison color or some shit. So you have something like that. And so, yeah. And then we can like remove this stuff, remove our skybox, and I don't know what's going on over there, but let's add in like a spotlight. Like this. So we got a spotlight. We got some cool new visualizers to kind of show you where things are pointing. It's kind of hard to deal with still. Something like that. There we go. We do not have new ways to integrate with Unreal except flipbooks, but we do have plans to do full simulation support in Unreal eventually. It's just a matter of time, honestly. Here's another example of some cool stuff with a bunch of oscillators and time shift and everything. So yeah, guys, I think that's about it. That's about everything I've got right this second. So yeah, if anybody has any extra questions, let me know. And if anybody has any other tutorial ideas, let me know. Oh yeah, so dust focused effects. Yeah, we have a lot of plans for dust type stuff. You would use the motion vectors from Smoke, Sasan, if you wanted to do something for particles. But in general, particles with motion vectors isn't really a good idea, honestly. It's not really going to work very well. We hope that in the future retiming will solve a lot of the need for motion vectors. Is kind of the hope. Anybody like Game of Thrones? You like the Game of Thrones explosion? Let's we'll mimic that. There we go. I think that was about the right color. I remember it had some really bright whites too. Kaboom. And we'll make it dark. We'll make the ground blue like the ocean. A dark blue. There we go. Game of Thrones. All right. So yeah. My questions have been pretty much answered. That's great. I hope for, I guess it's Hanu says, one minor detail on bloom is their plans to add multiple bloom layers, like smaller radius and bigger radius. That would be the plan. One thing I want us to do is kind of like break out these like styles and stuff into their own node, and then you would composite them similar to something like what do you call it, substance designer or something like that. So yeah. Are we going to have forces on collision? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. But I hope that, yeah, I'm not really sure what you mean by forces on collision. You could just fake that with like a radial force. It's like one quick thing I'll show for the, like a quick dust thing, and then we're gonna end the stream. This tutorial is getting too long to digest. But so like if I wanted to do like, say, I don't know, like a radial dust implosion or something like that, what we could do is we'll turn off this. We can lower our temperature as well because we don't want things to rise as much. We can really increase our dust here, and let's we could just leave it like the kind of color that it is. But maybe what we'll do with our smoke is we'll lower our density clamp so that it's a little bit less. We'll increase our shadow sharpness, lower the anisotropy, increase ambient occlusion, maybe give us a little bit more shadow density, that kind of thing. But I think it's pretty good. Okay, so that's some decent dust now. And now what I would do is I would do something like let's say like 320 by 320, and we'll do like 128 for Z. And so now we've got like this nice box. And then I would do a force noise here plus a repel strength. You do something like 15, right? And so now you've got something like that where you've got like a radius. So then you would say, okay, well, like, how does this relate to like collision? Like particles colliding before, which we're showing. If a bunch of them hit a surface, you could trigger like little ear pops on each hit. Yes, we have plans for that. Which, hang on, let me let me see something here. I'm gonna look at our dev channel just real quick because we were shown something today from one of our programmers, and I will show you. EmberGen. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna like maximize this and kind of see our Discord for a second. So here is your answer. So yes, you will be able to do things. In this case, the video is kind of laggy, but you can see like right there on the beginning, whenever they hit, like it kind of like explodes a little bit. So yeah, so you will be able to like you have an impact shape, and from that you'll be able to spawn a custom emitter from the impact shape. So we have some really advanced particle collision stuff coming up, peeps. Some really advanced particle collision stuff. So it's, EmberGen 075 is going to be dope, you know, whenever it's finished. So yeah, so that's really cool. So that shows off some things there. And so yeah, you know, and then like another thing, you know, like you can do like a top-down render of something like this, and when our looping simulations work again, you could just like loop this simulation, you know, so like kind of have like a rotor wash effect or something. And so yeah, but like in this case, you have like a torus that kind of like shows up at the beginning or whatever. Like you could clamp that out or whatever you want. And so different shapes are going to give you different emission patterns. You can see that the torus emitted differently than the sphere does, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's kind of like my thoughts on dust effects. You would just use some basic smoke, and then just kind of emit it however you want. And we can do maybe like 15 as our animation speed. You can have like a bigger smoke radius. We can go over here, change like our vorticity, make it more vorticity-like. Go to our volume post-process, do a sharpen on our smoke if we wanted to get like a lot more detail. It's pretty cool. We can lower the sharpening though, but yeah, so that's kind of how I would handle dust if that answers a question for like, you know, like an impact or whatever. Oh, there we go. So yeah, It's pretty cool how some of these things work. So you can do like a shockwave to like the side if like your line force is like kind of off kilter. You can like push things out radially in like a cone shape, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of power within EmberGen, guys. There's just there's so much you can do, so much you can cover. But for presets, we're gonna have like dust explosions, dust impacts, you know, bullet impacts, explosions, steam, you know, magic, kind of whatever you want. And so, but yeah, so that's it. There's one more thing I want to do, and I just want to see chromatic aberration on this thing real quick to see what it looks like. We'll go like ridiculous again, like 1500 or something crazy. That's just crazy. It's kind of cool, kind of neat. But anyway, so that's everything, guys. I have nothing else here. Let me add my camera so that you can see me. Hi, I'm here. I've popped up. Welcome. All right, so yeah, I really appreciate you guys watching the stream. We had like 200 something people maxed out at one point. I hope the stream was helpful. I hope you learned how to do simulations. I hope you understand how EmberGen works now. You know, I hope, yeah, like I really hope that this was a good deep dive into EmberGen, like showing a little bit of modulators, you know, showing like what kind of basic stuff you need, how emitters work, you know, everything. And hopefully you guys can start creating some really dope stuff now with what I've shown you for explosions. So yeah, make some stuff, post it on Twitter with the hashtag EmberGen, or Instagram or ArtStation or wherever. That way I can see it. I'd like to see you guys' work. So yeah. And I guess the last thing I'll say is we are assembling our trailer for 075. If you have any work and you're a studio, send us your work if we can get approval for it. We've already got some stuff from like Riot Games and NASA and all kinds of stuff. So if you want your work shown, send it. Or if you're just an indie person and you have a really cool project or a music video that you did or something and you think it's trailer worthy, send it to me and we'll be happy to credit you and put it in our trailer for 075. So I think that's it, guys. This is the culmination of over $1 million spent on 075. We've spent a lot of money to build this, but I think it's going to change the world. It's going to change the way you do simulations forever. And then, sneak peek, Liquigen. Just kidding. That's not happening. Gotcha. I got your hopes up. No Liquigen right this second, though. But, all right, guys. I'll catch you later. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in. Email me at nick@jengafx.com if you want to talk to me. Bye for now.